Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
This House is in session. Minutes for the meeting held on Tuesday, July 9, 2024 to be deferred. Honourable Acting Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the said minutes be deferred.
The question is that the aforementioned minutes be deferred. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby deferred.
Messages from Her Excellency present. Petitions, papers, government notices, private members' notices, notice of questions, report from select committees, first reading of bills, statements by ministers, congratulatory and obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, or replies to questions, notice of motion for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day. Thank you.
Honourable Acting Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42, 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of today's sitting.
Questions that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. Government business is the order of the day.
Order number 7, sir. Order number 7, in the name of the Honourable Minister of Industry, Innovation, Science and Technology, to resume the debate on the personal resolution that Parliament of Barbados take note of the Barbados Population Policy 2023.
Honourable Member for St. Peter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to add my voice to the debate that we started some weeks ago on the resolution before this Honourable Chamber that speaks to the Barbados Population Policy. I'll tell you, Mr. Speaker, or I'll share with you, that I had the privilege when the chair of that Population Commission was being introduced to the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Investment, I had the opportunity to have a conversation with the chair about matters related to population and demographics. It was with the chair and the then minister responsible for economic affairs. And I realized at that point that we were probably addressing a matter that might have been more important than we realized. And when I say we, I'm referring to myself and some others maybe like me. I'm not referring to the minister or the chair. But we were addressing a matter not just of numbers of people. This had to do with numbers of people, but it was not just about numbers of people. This matter that we set out to address had to do with the economic development and the social development of our country. It was a fundamental issue that we'd embarked upon to try to explore, to find out where we were. My recollection of the conversation really was that there was to be a situation analysis and then a study and then recommendations to be made. But I realized on that morning in the Ministry of Economic Affairs that this was a matter of great concern and great importance to the government and to the country as a whole. Now I say that to you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll add to what I'm saying that this government, and often when I speak in this honorable chamber, I speak to the fact that I'm proud to be a part of this government. I am proud to be part of a government that before the 17th actuarial review was completed, before the 2020-2021 census was done, this government recognized that we had an issue to address with respect to our population. I am proud to be part of a discerning government and a forward-thinking government. And I think Barbados ought to be proud to have such a government responsible for managing the affairs of this country. And I am hopeful that my children, my family, that everybody is thankful that there is vision, because Scripture tells us that where there is no vision, the people perish. Or in modern language, they suffer downgrades. They take the economy to the brink of collapse, where there is no vision. But this government had vision. This government still has vision. And so we embarked on the process of putting together that committee that addressed the population. But Mr. Speaker, that was just one of many examples of government's approach to managing this country. Government, from the time we took office at the end of May of 2018, determined that its agenda would be a people-centered agenda. It determined that and set about implementing policies and developing and crafting programs that supported the view that we were about others, that we were about our people, that we were about developing a country, but developing the country focused on the people of the country. And so, Mr. Speaker, that was the reason why, for example, we restored tertiary education free at the point of delivery. We determined that within, in terms of the way Barbados has developed, we determined that the best way to develop a country is for all of us to come together and ensure that our young people have access to tertiary education. Free at the point of delivery, not free absolutely, but allowing the children of poor people in Fort Hill and Six Mains and Speightstown and Rose Hill to be able to access tertiary education. That was an example of people-centered development. It was also that view, that underlying principle that caused us to restore the reverse tax credit. Now, the last government, in an effort to stave off a disaster that they were complicit in foisting upon the country, thought that to get out of it, we stopped poor people, children from going to university, because that was the impact. rich people were still able to send their children, but they also cut the reverse tax credit. The opposite of people-centered. We restored the reverse tax credit. Our people-centered approach caused us to implement a compensatory tax credit. There were people who were earning a little bit above what would qualify for the reverse tax credit. But they were not rich people. They were not really middle-class people. And this government determined that we would have a system where once government could afford it, those persons would get a refund of what would essentially be the amount of VAT that they had paid to the supermarket and to the hardware store in a year. That was a policy of a people-centered government. Public sector pay increases. You know, the first time probably in Barbados' history that a government has said to public officers, whether you take this or not, we give you an increase. We came into office, we said we would negotiate, but we were not even prepared to wait because we knew that the people were suffering. Public officers were suffering. And we gave a public sector pay increase. 5% if my memory serves me correctly. We also increased pensions. We increased non-contributory pensions in 2018. And I'll also be able to tell you that last year, 2023, at the beginning of the year, we increased contributory pensions. And I think that percentage increase was 4.5%, again, if my memory serves me correctly. These are policies of a people-centered government. A government that sees demographics and population not just as numbers, but representing people, representing the engine of growth and development of a country. And so some of the other examples of approaches that spoke to the people-centered nature of government's program included enacting regulations to the Safety and Health at Work Act. We enacted those regulations because we are concerned about safety and health in the workplace, and we believe that all that is possible must be done to protect the human beings, the people who work, who generate economic activity, who drive growth and development in this country. And so, for example, and I remind this Honourable Chamber, and through you, I want to remind some of those who have been those who are to benefit from these regulations. So I share, for example, that all persons working at fuel stations, all persons working at petrol stations are entitled to an annual medical, including blood tests, relevant blood tests, at no cost to the worker. They are entitled to that under the regulations to the Safety and Health at Work Act. I also remind, Mr. Speaker, that those persons who are working what we call off-site, the regulations require and demand that toilet facilities be made available. And this government, this people-centered government, even before the regulation was put in place, the Barbados Agricultural Management Company constructed toilet facilities so that those workers in the fields working on government estates would have toilet facilities to do what all human beings do. These are some of those policies that underline the fact that we see people, we feel people, and we recognize that our policies must be aimed at developing and improving the lots of people. That is the reason why, Mr. Speaker, government, under the Labor Clauses Public Contracts Act, established in this honorable chamber, with myself standing in this spot, minimum rates of pay and conditions of work for workers who are working with businesses receiving contracts for construction and road building in this country. We establish those because we see people. We understand the importance of people to a society. We understand the importance of people to a country's development. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, very soon, and the Chief Labor Officer has advised that she has completed her consultations, and very soon I will return to this honorable chamber to establish minimum rates of pay and conditions of work for those who are employed in the tourism accommodation sector. This will be done pursuant to a bill that is now an act that we passed in this honorable chamber, the Labor Clauses Concessions Act. Mr. Speaker, I mentioned these as part of my intervention into this debate to reinforce the fact that a population policy based on the work of that population committee was not done just to talk about numbers of people. That was not what we were talking about. Not only what we were talking about. Not just numbers of people, but people and their impact, their involvement, their integration into our national development. That is how this Barbados Labour Party in government operates. Now, I mentioned that the Population Commission was established before the 17th Actuarial Review. It was established before we even conducted the census, which is the 10-year census, which was to have started, or which started in a limited way in 2020, concluded in 2021. But we established that Population Commission even before we had this other information. Again, and I repeat, the forward-thinking nature of a progressive government who does not wait for things to happen to it, but who, as it examines what is before it, recognizes where the challenges are. And I want the people of Barbados to continue on the road of recognizing how we manage and stay the course as we vision for the country with their input and enact these policies that are people-centered and people-driven. The census said to us that, well, or confirmed, I should use the word confirmed, to us the challenges that we were sure we saw when we came into office. So, for example, whereas in 2010, we had a population of 278,000, or thereabouts, most of us, when we speak to others, when we travel, somebody will ask us, so what's the population of Barbados? You know, many years ago, we used to say 250,000. But we started to say, well, maybe 280 to 90. One or two people started to say 300,000. It's probably 300,000 by now. Because we were expecting a certain growth in our population. The census of 2020-2021, said to us, and shocked some of us, that we had moved from 278 to under 270. 269,000. Mr. Speaker, That was a surprise to many people. We also found out from the census that the median age had increased, but the increase was not marginal. When you go from 37.3, which is what I think 2010's number was, to 42.5, that is not a marginal increase. Those 5 percentage points work out to maybe 13 or so percent. That is a significant increase in our median age. That tells us that our population, not just declining, but also aging. Now, an aging population, those in Latin would say prima facie, on the face of it, is not necessarily a bad thing. People are living longer, and that is always a desirable thing. It has impact, though, when connected to a declining absolute population. It has severe implications for the country's development and for the country's ability to support persons as they get older. So social security is the second thing that I'm referring to. We also recognize that our birth rate, 1.6. The demographers tell us, and the statisticians, that in order to replace your population, you need a replacement rate of 2.1. We are at 1.6. The reason for our declining population. And as the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central indicated when she led so eloquently the debate on this resolution, that our deaths started to outstrip our births in 2016, from as far back as 2016. Mr. Speaker, these numbers tell a story. And the story that these numbers tell, when we are looking at the context or within the context of the development of a country, these numbers, when taken together, do not paint a very good picture, do not tell the most positive story. And I say when taken together, I know that there are a lot of mischievous people around. There are a lot of liars too, not in this honorable chamber now, but there are a lot of them around as well. And so I just want to repeat, I'm talking about the numbers when taken together. So I am not saying, as a few clowns did when we had our national insurance revitalization, that there was anything wrong with people living longer. There is nothing wrong, there's everything good about people living longer. But I'm talking about all of these metrics taken together within the context of a country's economic and social development. They do not paint a good picture. And so it is evident that there is need for action. Again, this government is not one that waits until issues blow up, then to respond. This government is a proactive government. And so what we are always prone to do is to address issues once we sense that there could be danger. And one of those issues, Mr. Speaker, had to do with our social security reform. The 17th Actuarial Review said to us that the actuary started to see some of these trends. He did not conduct a census, but he, like a very visionary Barbados Labour Party in 2018, and even prior to 2018, saw what was on the horizon. And in the 17th Actuarial Review, the actuary said to us, and said to the country, because that document has been shared widely, the 17th Actuarial Review was shared even before it was laid in this honorable chamber. this Barbados Labour Party took stakeholder groups into its confidence. We had many meetings with BART, with the Democratic Labour Party, in its then form. It keeps changing, but in its then form, we consulted with them. We consulted with Bishop Adderley and his political organization, with faith-based organizations, civil society organizations, staff of the National Insurance Department at the time. And then we went to the public. But that report said to us that if nothing was done, if no action was taken, by 2034, we would have a major issue. We would have a major issue. And Mr. Speaker, this Barbados Labour Party, the party that I'm so proud to be a part of, rather than say, well, you know, Bajans just give you 2 terms, they might give you 3. If we left this, whoever take over after, we have to fight that battle. That is not how we operate, Mr. Speaker. A people-centered government. We decided that very early on in our 2nd term, we would do what was necessary to make sure that the 2034 scenario was not even possible. But that 2034 scenario was based on demographic factors. Factors of numbers of people, length of life. And so we had to make decisions based on what the research was saying to us. And I'm happy to say to you, Mr. Speaker, that after having shared the report with the stakeholder groups I mentioned earlier, and having done extensive consultations with the public, we went across this country and we elicited and received and took into consideration all of the proposals, the suggestions, the criticisms, everything. We even arranged for one of those town hall meetings to be held in George Street. I don't know if I have to tell you where it was held, in George Street. That meeting was not a bacchanal meeting that the place has become known for, but it was a good meeting that brought out from those persons who participated some ideas that could be used, and we established a core group. The Honourable Minister who led the debate on this resolution was an integral part of that group. Senator Drake, Sir Roy, Mr. Wismar Graves, the actuary himself. We established a core group that took all of the proposals that we got from the people of this country and all of the interest groups, and we were able to fashion, we were able to bring to this Honourable Chamber some of those policies that needed to be implemented, that need to be implemented in some cases, to make sure that what the numbers say to us could be our future does not become our future. That our social security system, the national insurance scheme, is able to be sustainable and to provide benefits for persons who are working, but also, importantly, to provide benefits for those persons who, through good health care, good lifestyle choices, are living longer. We want people to live as long as possible. If everybody in Barbados could live to the age that my late constituent lived to in Fort Hill, he lived to, this is Mel Williams, is who I'm speaking of, Melville Uriah Williams, 110. If everybody could live to 110, we would be happy. But we have to make sure that we could keep them going financially. A person at 100 is unlikely to be working and earning. And so the revitalization of the national insurance scheme, our social security apparatus, as a country, we took all the proposals, we analyzed them, we modeled impacts, and we were able to share with the country, and we did it in this honorable chamber, we were able to share with the country those measures that we were taking to ensure that our social security system was sustainable and would remain sustainable into the future. That is how a government that is people-centered operates. That is how this Barbados Labour Party in government operates. Mr. Speaker, we recognize that what we are seeing as we examine our population and we study the trends, a reduction in the population and an aging population means that the available workers, that number reduces. That has immediate implications. Those who work are those who add to product. So work could be employed. I'm going to speak to unpaid care work in a minute. But those who work add to product, add to income. So when you were lecturing, gross national income and gross national product, they add. But they also are consumers, which adds to the movement of funds in an economy. And those who are working or of working age tend to consume more and spend more in an economy, and so add more financially, so I'm not talking a qualitative, this is quantitative, add more financially to the output of a country. And so when the working cohort is falling, is declining in terms of numbers, a country has a problem if it is going to maintain the standard of living for the country and the people in the country. We also have the situation where, as the population ages, there's a matter of unpaid care work. Older persons have to be cared for. And, we have, I know we don't call names, I didn't ask for permission to call names, but I'm going to call a slogan. You may be familiar with the slogan that says, Mia cares. I'm not calling a name, I'm just calling a slogan. But we belong to a party that cares. And so the matter of providing care for our aging population, for our elders, is one that is important to us. It has to happen. When it happens, oftentimes persons are taken out of the working population. And I know in your other career as a social worker, you're also aware of that. And a lot of times, that care work is unpaid care work. And so while it adds significant value to a country, the measures of economic activity those measures do not at this point reflect properly the value of unpaid care work. We have, in recent times, added to our list of CARICOM nationals who can move freely. We added 3 categories recently: agricultural workers, we added private security officers, and we also added household domestics. Barbados also, very recently, 2 months ago, ratified the convention, the International Labour Organization Convention on Domestic Workers. And I had the honor at the International Labour Conference held last month to chair the Committee on Decent Work in the Care Economy. And I say to you, Mr. Speaker, that a country with a government like ours is a country that is thinking about impacts down the road, future impacts. And the matter of care work, providing care for those in our society that need care is an important one. And that is one of those revelations from the population policy, and coming out of that, on the policy for aging, on the policy for persons with disabilities. These are all connected. They're all connected, and that is the reason why starting with that population commission was such a fantastic idea on the part of government. To understand where we are, understand what the future portends because of where we are, the impacts on our society, the impacts on our economy. These things are important. Now, I spoke to gross income of a country being impacted. Tax revenue is also impacted. A declining working population, persons leaving the workforce and going into retirement and staying on retirement, tax revenue, and for those who may not know, tax revenue buys garbage trucks. Tax revenue buys buses. Tax revenue paved a road in Black Bess, and some in Spike Sound. I expect tax revenue to help me in 6 Mains. And so, Mr. Speaker, if, as the Prime Minister has also announced, some assistance for fisher folk, you know where that money comes from? That is tax revenue. If our tax revenue is declining, the country has a problem. And so understanding the population changes, the population dynamics is important. And that is what the policy has come out of. We have to address these issues. I just want, before I finish, to share some of the measures that we have taken. I spoke earlier about the reform of the Social Security, National Insurance reform. We refer to it as revitalization because our approach was to add life, add longevity to the National Insurance Scheme, or our Social Security program. We are still exploring the possibility of paid paternity leave. We are still, as a matter of fact, we've had a number of meetings and we're getting close to be able to come back to Cabinet because Cabinet has agreed in principle, pending studies by the actuary and some others, but we are approaching that point as well, paid paternity leave, because we recognize that while, and I'm going to be very careful not to talk about women and getting more children and our families getting more children and those kinds of things, but our people-centered approach to governance says to us that whether it is 1.6 or 1 or 2 or 5, there must be a quality of child rearing that takes place in Barbados. And for that to happen, fathers must be involved. You can't just be involved in bringing the sperm and the egg together. That is, for some, the easy part, maybe for some, the hard part. But a father must be involved in the rearing of our children. Parents must be involved. And so paternity leave is one of those things. I spoke about free movement and the 3 categories that we added. The Conference of Heads have also agreed that there would be full free movement. We're working out some of those mechanics. National insurance identification is one of those. We're also addressing, I'm not sure if that's completed yet, the matter of how we amend the revised treaty of Chaguaramas. Those are two areas that my ministry was involved with, along with others in the Caribbean. We have, in the area of education, lifelong education, having training and retraining opportunities so that people can retool and refocus. Issues that relate to health and health services and health care. And here I will say to this honorable chamber that my ministry strongly supports the work of the Breastfeeding and Child Nutrition Foundation. We believe that places of work, places where mothers, after 3 months or 4 months of being at home with a child, go back to participate in building business and by extension building national economy, those mothers must be provided with the facilities that allow them to do something that is so natural that if they don't do it, it almost sometimes happens on its own. They must be able, for example, to express their milk and store it so they can feed their children. Research has shown that children who are breastfed are better socialized and have lower rates of disease further in life. So I just wanted to say that because we're talking about people, and I began by saying this is not, and the Labour Party's approach to government and governance is not just about numbers, but is about quality. It is about people, seeing people, being people-centered in our approach. And so, Mr. Speaker, I am happy to support this, the Barbados Population Policy 2023. It is, as I indicated earlier, a reflection of a forward-thinking government. It recognizes that when we speak about the population, we are not just talking about a number, 269,000, or life expectancy of 79 or 81. We are talking about human beings. And so everything we do as a government will continue to be people-centered. The ministry I have the honor and pleasure, really, of leading will continue to be people and worker-centered in all of its deliberations, in all of its policy development. Because this government, this Barbados Labour Party government, feels people, sees people, understands people, and recognizes that it has a responsibility to lift people from where they are to where they can be potentially. I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir. I truly would like to start by thanking all who have spoken in this debate so far. I do not intend to wrap up at this point. I believe that the Honourable Minister who introduced the debate, the resolution, will do so. But it is my duty to thank all who have spoken and to equally thank the Minister for leading this debate. She would have had in a previous life and in a previous term responsibility for coordinating on my behalf the report which we now are debating. And as you would have heard from everyone, this was one of the first actions taken by this government when we came into office in 2018. And we did so, sir, because we understood that we would have to treat to both mission critical and mission transformation issues. And these are not just buzzwords, sir. We found a government, as you know, and a country that was floundering. And we had to work to literally resuscitate the country. But we always knew that even as we resuscitated the country, there would be limits as to where the country could go, and those limits would be determined by how much we could grow. And that ultimately, growth is not only a feature that is constrained by how much money you have to invest or the legislative or business environment within which people function. It is also constrained, Mr. Speaker, by literally population. And we realized in opposition, when I looked at the numbers in the social and economic report, and especially having served in the Ministry of Education for 7 years as I did, that there was a significant decline in the numbers of persons who were in fact taking the 11 plus and the annual cohort of students. And this thing hit us strong, strong, strong in opposition. And we understood then that if between 2001, when I ceased being Minister of Education, and 2017, 18, just before we came into office, that you had gone from a cohort in primary school of just on or about 4,000 to just on or about 2,500 as it was then. And I believe the numbers are even lower now as we speak, to about 2,200, 2,300 of the ones in primary school, not necessarily the ones sitting the 11 plus, because what you saw was a continued decline year by year by year to the point where it truly was disturbing. At the same time, the death rate has declined, as you've heard in this country, largely because Ambejans are living longer, because over the course of the last 80 years, but for sure the last 75 years, we have had policies implemented by successive governments that for the most part have featured on being able to improve the quality of life of people in this country. And you know, sir, I'll digress for a second, because it has become popular to accuse politicians of no good all the time. But I make bold to say in this chamber that it is those who have given public service and political service, that have made a defining difference in the quality of life that we have as Barbadians today, because other than one or two aberrations, and we know those aberrations well, other than one or two aberrations, we have seen for the most part those who have come to this chamber, those who have gone to the other chamber, and those who have worked in the public service of Barbados work cooperatively with the population to be able to bring about a level of development that is the envy of many across the Commonwealth and the world. And it is important to make this point, sir, because in the world in which we live today, everything is about down-pressing people, and everything is about the worst allegations about people. And because you have the capacity for fake news and all other kinds of conspiracy theories to rise, you have this strong sense of dread and despair. And sometimes I wonder, how do young people even begin to remain hopeful for the future if all that is coming at them is to undermine their capacity to be to have faith and to be hopeful of a future that they can help shape and that they can help influence both locally and perhaps even more so than ever, regionally and globally. So I want to thank those, therefore, in whom we invested the responsibility to be able to produce this report. In particular, the chair, Ms. Roberta Clark, and the deputy chair, Winnell Arlene Jones, were supported by Dr. Yolanda Arlene, Dr. Jonathan Lashley, Dr. Madhuvanti Murphy, Mr. Boo Rudder. If you see Pierce Rudder, you might think that you don't know who the person is, but that is Antonio Pierce Boo Rudder, as we know him. Mr. Delanos Canterbury, Mrs. Janelle Canterbury Mounsey, Mr. Jeroen Wood, and Ms. Paula Baer, a combination of both public servants and those willing to give public service for the purpose of this report. And their work has been comprehensive. And they have not tried to impose themselves, but at the same time, they have made it very, very clear that the country is facing and has faced declining rates of birth and fertility, so much so that fertility rates have remained below replacement level since 1960. I didn't say 1990, Mr. Speaker. I didn't say 2000, Mr. Speaker. I said 5 years before I was even born, 1960. And very often I contextualize this for persons across the region, because you will come to realize that this is not a problem unique to Barbados, even though Barbados may be facing the worst consequences of it more than most in the region. But in 1950, Barbados had a population of 200,000, sir. Bahamas and Belize had a population of 80,000 each. Today, sir, 74 years later, Barbados' population has actually declined from what it was at its height, according to the 2020 census, to 267,000 roughly, as it is today, and Bahamas and Belize are in excess of 400,000. Mr. Speaker, it does not take a Solomon to understand and appreciate what is happening here. And I said that our circumstances are not unique, and many of you have heard me cite these statistics often over the last few years. Guyana is the size of England and Wales, but Guyana has a population of just under 1 million, I would say no, whereas England and Wales has a population of 65 million people. Suriname is bigger geographically than the Netherlands. The Netherlands has a population of 17 million people. Suriname has a population of 580,000 people. Belize is the size of Israel, 8 million. Belize's population, as I just told you, is just over 400,000. Barbados and Singapore have a lot in common in terms of size and capacity to be an entrepot. Singapore has significantly grown its land mass through land reclamation. We have a little land reclamation. Only this morning at a funeral of the late Sir Philip Thoreau, others were reflecting that he and Gabby used to swim where Princess Alice Highway is now. As boys, that would have been water for them to swim. And therefore, there was no surprise that Gabby sang as poignantly as he did this morning, because he and Sir Philip grew up as boys together in Bridgetown. But the point is that land reclamation was known to us equally, 64, 65 years ago. And we speak as though these things are foreign concepts. But I go back to the point. Singapore grew its land mass, but it also grew its population in a massive way, and they are now just under 6 million, probably 5.5 million people, as compared to Barbados' 267,000. And Mr. Speaker, with a land mass that's probably about 40% more than us, including the 25% that they deliberately reclaimed and grew their country by. I give these facts, sir, because it is always important to have context. And while we therefore set about the mission-critical issues of saving the dollar and helping to provide the basic services in government that were deprived of all sorts of support, from buses to garbage trucks to all of the other things, we understood that mission transformation, if we were going to take the country and transform it and carry it to the next level, required that we understood what were our limitations in terms of a key factor of production: people, human beings. And Barbados has been responsible for sending people out from as far back as even before emancipation. People forget that we literally helped colonize the Carolinas, and that the first 7 governors of the Carolinas were from here. People forget that immediately after emancipation, Barbadians went in large numbers to Guyana and to Trinidad, and that they taught others there the art of how to boil sugar and make sugar in a factory. And that Barbadians equally, as the years went on, didn't only a third of, it's almost mind-boggling, almost a third of our population, male population, left here at the turn of the 20th century to go to Panama and to help build the canal. Can you think of a third of anybody's population today leaving any country to go and do anything without it causing major, major consternation? And if you go to Panama today, you see all of the elements of the Barbadian influence still very, very much there among those in the population. Mr. Speaker, even after that, we continue to send people out. We sent them out as policemen, as teachers, as preachers, as nurses. We sent them out eventually back to London and England as bus drivers and working in London transport and all over. And one of the things that we were doing, and we used to tell ourselves over and over, as a child I remember people telling us in primary school, that Barbados had the luxury of being able to send people out so it could keep the population down. And that Barbados had the wonderful example of family planning, which from the 1950s helped us to control the population. Now, those things absolutely made sense, because if you had limited capacity and too many people, people would go to find a better life wherever they could. And so one of the things at a very personal level that hurt me about the last decade is that there was truly a sense from the mid-90s, early to mid-90s, that Bajans were prepared to come home as a matter of choice to be able to build out their country. And a lot of the students who went out came back. And for about 20 years, we had a reversal of that process of emigration, where people went out over and over and over and over. And I felt that it was a statement of confidence and the capacity for them to be able to see themselves living and raising their families and continuing to be able to do well here. So when the last decade came, we had not only an exodus of those people from the rest of the region who were here, and I'm going to come back to that point particularly because, in a sense, I wish that the honourable member who just spoke would have given us even more data as to the loss of population as they expected it to grow in 2007-8, at the time when they were looking at the actual reports and numbers. But what we saw in the last decade, sir, was a resumption of the pattern for emigration, the pattern for leaving the country. And equally, what we saw was a failure for persons to want to come here because they felt that they could not get a proper living here, particularly since there was a very, first of all, the environment was not friendly. It was hostile in a very real sense. But secondly, because there was a declining pie in real terms, it meant that it would have been difficult for anybody else to be able to stay here and get work. And then, of course, some of the countries from which they came started to do significantly better, and therefore, they could return home with ease to be able to live the best life that they could possibly live. Mr. Speaker, I say these things because, in a very real sense, the hardest thing for us to do now as a population is come to grips with the fact that we don't want to deal with this issue. We have to deal with this issue. This is not a case of desire anymore. This is a case of necessity. And this country has seen a declining population, an aging population, a declining level of production as a result, and declining taxation. The last honourable member who spoke said it well. Taxes is what will help him deal with 6 men's. And all of the erosion that happened last week again with Hurricane Beryl, where a month ago we didn't have to go and look for that money to go and help stabilize both the road as well as the opportunities for the places where people can make their livelihood on that strip there. Similarly, a month ago we didn't have to deal with the issue of having to find funds to help with fishermen. And we will help with them, not just with the 25% deposit, as I said, for everyone, but for where those people who really can't get back up on their feet again on their own, the government will stand in the breach, and you'll hear more, as I said before in the press conference, and I'll continue to say, because if we have to create a company with segregated cells in order to be able to help people back on their feet, we shall do it. And all of the money that is being offered to us as a country, instead of it coming to the consolidated fund, we've said put it in the account to help the fishermen of this country and their families live, in addition to whatever business interruption benefits that we put in place for them. But sir, the point is this, that with declining taxation, with declining production, you have less revenue. With a declining and aging population, you have less people working to support the persons who cannot work. And with an aging population, you have increased expenditure that is required of you in order to be able to deal with healthcare, yes, of course, but also to deal just with the caring aspect of their ability to live and to continue to function as citizens in the land of their birth and the land that they've adopted. And therefore, sir, there is increased expenditure that the government will face. This government during COVID introduced the concept of community elder support by the National Assistance Board. Sir, that has cost us almost another $10 million a year in salaries alone. And we do it, sir, because there are too many Barbadians who, without this, will simply fall through the cracks. In this estimates alone, we are already making provision for the need for similar other care facilities like the Seroptimus Village or the Vauxhall Senior Citizens Home that will be done in other parishes in order to ensure that we can create a dignified existence for people who help build this country for us to benefit from today. The geriatric hospital that is going up there on the ABC Highway is the clearest statement that a government puts money where it wants to in order to deal with things that matter. And one of the first major projects that we settled in our head was to be able to ensure that we do not have our elderly people at the risk of storm surge. And that having to move them and having to deal with them in a way, in a building that was never designed. And for the nurses and the orderlies, to be able to have to function efficiently in that space. Can you imagine having to lift people who are immobile every time they want to move from here to there, sir? And there's no proper set of elevators, there's no proper set of pathways, nothing. And the government said, look, we care enough not only about those senior citizens who are in there, but the people who have committed their lives to work in this area to make them more comfortable. It cannot be right that they then subject themselves to that kind of heavy lifting and those kinds of onerous working conditions that effectively then undermine their quality of life. Mr. Speaker, the government recognized, therefore, that an aging population, and there's a policy paper framework coming by the Honourable Minister, who I suspect will speak in this debate, that shows you that in our framework for risk management and in our framework for transformation, managing an aging population is a critical aspect of what we must do each and every day in this country, at the level of government, but at the level of communities and families as well. You have to recognize how you're going to take care of them when you reach a certain point and you can't do it yourself. But the consequences of it are this, and we saw it fully in the debate over pension reform, that if you don't have enough people coming to work every day to contribute, how are you going to deal with it? At one level is taxation, and we just explained why we need the taxation. But another level is the pensions, the prudential framework necessary to have a stable national insurance and social security system. And Mr. Speaker, because we also believe that we can bet on ourselves both in terms of growth and population, the government took decisions that said, look, we are playing the long game. We are doing this as a form of risk management with a long view because we believe that we have a chance that we can improve our odds. But we can't do it unless we have a long run-up. And that long run-up is to have both 2028 as the first adjustment period, but 2034 as the second one, recognizing that if we get right the equation with respect to who can contribute to growth and how we can reduce the dependency ratio, how we can deal with the factor that we don't have enough people working every day, not just paying taxes, but supporting the national insurance and social security system, that we may well be able to change our future, but it requires, as I said, having that long run-up and doing the other things like this that can have an impact on the quality of life and what we can produce and earn as a nation as we go forward. So, sir, this report regrettably came in the middle of COVID. And I don't need to tell anyone that in COVID, we had to focus on mission survival, not even mission critical. And therefore, it was parked one side to allow the level of consultations. How are you going to go and consult on a report in the middle of COVID when there's restricted movement? And in any event, who taking that on when people just studying survival physically and then taking care of their family and trying to keep the family's heads above water? So COVID robbed us, sir, probably of 2 years, and we regret that. But we also felt that because we're an island, and islands have different features, that we needed to take our time and to let this commission do their consultation in their own deliberate way, in a comprehensive way, but in their own deliberate way across the country. Some people have had and weighed in already, others are, I suppose, will still continue to weigh in. But the important point is that the report does not give us a specific number by which to grow this population. But it says that as you grow the population, which you must do, there are a number of things that you must take into account. First and foremost, there are really only 3 ways of growing the population. One, that you look for Bajans, descendants of Bajans. And there are other countries doing the same thing that we are doing now. The United Kingdom recently announced an extension as to who could benefit from citizenship. Theirs is time-bound over a wide period of time, but it is still time-bound. In other words, instead of only the child of a Bajan being able to be a Bajan by descent, you can want to extend it to great-grandchildren or grandchildren. And Mr. Speaker, this is without prejudice to the fact that they will still, if you are a great-great-grandchild, while you might not get it as of right, because of your linkages with the country, that should give you points when the new immigration bill comes, so you will still have a good chance of being able to access it, but it will not necessarily be as of right. So we have as a country to decide whether, and I am sympathetic to this, as I've said before, whether we are going to extend citizenship as a right to grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Mr. Speaker, when we think of a family, the most natural thing is the grandchild. In fact, the parents become jelly, and you don't recognize them because the things that they're going to do for a grandchild, they would never do for a child. You understand? I see it all the time with my own family, the things that my nieces get away with that we could never get away with as children. And I say, are these the same people? So that's natural. But similarly, great-grandchildren, because when you look at the fact that many of our people have children young, and because they're living longer, by 60, people got great-grandchildren nowadays, easy so. So that, how would we look at somebody whose navel string very here, who is as Bajan as cuckoo and flying fish, who know the difference between 6 men's and 6 roads, and who want to live here, and who in fact have lived here in many instances. But because, and just study, listen to this with me, the great-grandparent might have gone overseas to study or work, working at London Transport or studying. Had a child when they was there. To come home 3-4 years after being there, or 5 years, and their children, because they left a sister up there in England, the child who they have goes up there to study as well, because they can stay at the sister and they can study. This time, everybody's still living in Barbados, you know. The person is out there only for another 4 or 5 years again, but during the time, when you're at university or when you're in those young ages, is when you meet people and when you get married, and when you're likely to have children. So that the grandchild now born overseas as well. You with me, sir? And then lo and behold, the grandchild goes up there and has a child again. And the grandchild and the great-grandchild, even though they've spent the majority of their lives in Barbados, even though they speak with a Bajan accent, even though their family is as Bajan as is humanly possible to be, might be a Calypsonian, might be somebody who we describe as uniquely and particularly Bajan, and all of a sudden you find out, I'm sure the Minister for Home Affairs knows it because it happened to me many a time when I was Minister of Home Affairs, that the injustice then of families not being able to have their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren be able to live in the land of their birth. And then they're sometimes stateless because they may be born in a country that does not give them the right to citizenship. So they then end up in a legal quagmire. So these are the things that are practical, and we are doing no different when we come to that than the approach taken by the Right Excellent Errol Barrow in the early 1970s with the passage of the current Immigration Act. The only difference is that in those days, people talked about immigrant status in terms of residency. Nobody speaks about immigrant status in these days. It's almost even infradig to be able to refer to people as immigrants in that classic way, because it has taken such a negative connotation, because the world has found ways to allow capital to move, but the world don't find ways to allow people to move, and a lot of it has to do, regrettably, too much with the color of our skin and the location of our birth. And that, regrettably, is something that the world is still fighting up with in a post-colonial order that it has not come to grips with resolving. But at the same time, Mr. Speaker, what we have is the concept, however, remaining pure. That in the previous Immigration Act, you could get immigrant status on the basis of skills and on the basis of investment. Which brings us to the second point that they recommend in here, which is managed migration. And in addition to that, we have obviously since then opened up to the CARICOM, Caribbean community, and we have allowed a range of people to be able to come here to benefit under the single market and single economy, because not just money must flow, as I said, but also the capacity for people to move, because we know that money without people, nothing will happen. So that the reality is that we have to take a serious decision when we bring the immigration bill as to how we manage migration into Barbados. And why, sorry? Yeah. Why this is important, sir, is because we don't need to have open floodgates. What we will have is a managed migration policy so that the skills that are needed can be brought in rather than just believing that you bring in any and everybody and that you flood out the country and you end up with a preponderance of skills that have no jobs and a preponderance of jobs for which there are no skills. Well, that don't make no sense. And therefore, there are other countries in the world who have managed this well over 50, 60 years, Canada being the best example of it. And Canada has brought in anywhere between 2 to 3% of their population, for the most part, over the course of a number of years, in order to be able to offset the very huge, huge disadvantage that they have with the absence of population, given the scale and the size of a country that they have. Why we like Canada as well as a model is because when you come, you have to assimilate in Canada. They respect your religion, they respect those diverse aspects of life, but at the end of the day, you're Canadian first. And that is why even yesterday as I spoke to the country, I made the point that when people come here, we don't need to follow them, they need to follow us. You remember the old time saying, follow Patton, kill Cadogan? We don't need to follow them, they need to follow us. And we set out what is acceptable in Barbados according to our values, as opposed to being the other way around. Now, there are going to be many options that we can discuss as to how we do it. But the third one is really the problem. It is the one that we would love all of us to do, but it should have been dealt with 25 years ago. And that is the natural way of encouraging families to do what they have to do to grow the population. The good old-time way. The problem is that the good old-time way, while it may bring joy to many, does not allow us to solve the problem in under 20 to 25 years. Mr. Speaker, this country does not have another 20 to 25 years with respect to this. The mere fact that our population has declined has put us in the position of a developed country. When Germany saw the same thing happen to them, Angela Merkel opened her borders and immediately took a shot of adrenaline. 1 million people, bam. And she didn't take people who were German. She took 1 million people predominantly from the Middle East, which was a huge risk for her in terms of the steps and the decisions. But she understood that if she did not get people in there, Germany's growth would be undermined, Germany's social security system would be undermined, and they would not continue to be able to benefit or to cater to their current population in the way that the population expected to be catered to. Mr. Speaker, I am not going to tell you that it is easy to meet the needs of the kind of state that we have in this country. Owen Arthur, the Right Honourable Owen Arthur, in 2006 or 7, in his estimate speech, I suspect it was 2006, because he didn't do the one in 2007, introduce it. And he said that the issue of entitlements in a modern state of Barbados is going to be challenged more and more because we have a declining base of production and revenue. We may well be able to get through some corridors and we will do what we have to do, but it is not as simple or as easy as people think it used to be. But we want to be that country that continues to provide these benefits to Barbadians, because on 166 square miles, there is nowhere to run. And that is why I'm asking Bajans to step up and to claim back and to build a common peace. Because at the end of the day, you don't have anywhere to run. In the larger countries that are seeing problems, they have ability to be able to isolate and move and shift, etc. Although the reality of 18 murders in Trinidad this weekend is perhaps one of the most sobering and awful pieces of news that any of us can have. because this continued access to guns is a major issue in this hemisphere, full stop, in the whole hemisphere. But if we are going to be serious about being able to maintain the quality of life for people from Pike Corner, right back through to Silver Sands, to people from Glen Burnie, right back across to Fitz Village, to people in Bush Hall, to people in the Glebe, to people in Rock Hall, St. Thomas, to people in Belle Plaine, Mr. Speaker, then it means that we have to have a sober and mature conversation about how we do it as a people. And coming to this job, the one thing I know is that the job does not admit of only easy decisions. It requires us to confront difficult challenges, and those challenges range from the pension reform, where, as you heard from the previous speaker, the government did not wait to kick it down the road, because we understand that, like with the human body, the earlier you can deal with a medical problem or condition, the more likely you are to be successful in recovering from it. Not only is prevention better than cure, but early intervention can also save lives. Early intervention can change the prospect of a country. And if we can, it should have been earlier. I accept that. But it has fallen to us to ensure that we do not kick it down the road anymore, because it's a difficult discussion to have. And Mr. Speaker, this government is committed to doing the things that are necessary for mission transformation. When we set out the 6 missions, sir, it is not rhetoric. It is our reality that we must keep Barbados clean and green, and that we must protect the biodiversity that we have on it, because at the end of the day, if we don't do that, we are going to suffer, as we suffered 2 weeks ago with Hurricane Beryl, with respect to how it has decimated the fishing industry and has totally damaged in a major way the coastal infrastructure of this country, to the point where we're going to have to look for hundreds of millions, if not $1 billion, in order to recover over the next few years. 2, that we must have the capacity to look in the mirror and see who we like, and be part and parcel of that discussion that recognizes that we are in charge of who we are, and that even regardless of where we go, the Barbadian, and I made the point when I opened Crop Over 2 weeks ago, they say we are in a culture, they say we are in the body. Well, we have proven far from that we have the confidence to be able to manage our affairs, from having our own head of state right back down to making decisions and becoming a thought leader in the world, rather than simply being a follower. And the third goal, Mr. Speaker, we say that everybody must have a food and must have water, because it's too basic to life. And you can't have a big set of long talk when people are hungry. You can't have no big set of long talk when people can't get water. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, we've taken water and access to water and augmentation of water as the most serious provision that we have to take care of, alongside of our public health and our access to good health care in this country. The two are inextricably linked, Mr. Speaker. And in fact, the two determine whether the first priority of a government, which is law enforcement and national security, can be maintained. The fourth thing, Mr. Speaker, is that we say, look, we are going to make each other better off in terms of health care, wellness, and safety. And that is why I spoke to the country like I did yesterday, because at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, all of us will determine what kind of country we got, you know. It ain't the government alone. It ain't the police alone. It ain't the customs alone. And even how much ever we may have put scanners at the ports and all of those things since we came in, to be able to bring down the guns, the ones that came in before, they don't melt, they don't rust away, they don't liquefy. They're still there. And that is part of what we're dealing with, which is why I say that guns don't walk and guns don't talk. It is human beings. And that is why we need to ensure, Mr. Speaker, that we put in the hard work to be able to give people opportunity, and people themselves need to put in the hard work to recognize that with every choice and with every freedom comes responsibility. And those basic things in life that need to be reinforced in our people have to be reinforced. Whether it is through civility, whether it is loyalty, whether it is learning to care, whether it is learning responsibility, whether it is learning that choices have consequences, all of these things help in the maturing process if we are going to be honest with ourselves and about the kind of Barbados that we want our people to enjoy living as we go forward. Mr. Speaker, the fifth one is about enfranchisement. These missions are not esoteric. This is about enfranchising people. And the government has taken the decision that even when we have to deal with serious state-owned enterprise reform, deal with and see the people. See the workers at the port, see the workers at the airport, and whatever else happens to them, make sure that they have a piece of the action. The people with the Tenantries Freehold Purchase Act, successive governments have made sure that in spite of the fact that people didn't have a big set of money, that they can own land, whether at 10 cents a square foot or $2.50 a square foot. This government has capped the price of land for people as we expand the housing program to make sure that they don't be the victims of $20 and $25 a square foot, but that it can be capped at $12 or $13 a square foot as whatever is necessary as the prices go. Mr. Speaker, we have done these things because we believe that it is our duty to empower and to enfranchise. And the sixth mission, Mr. Speaker, is to recognize that we live in a world that has been completely overtaken by a digital revolution. And if, therefore, you don't give our people the tools and create systems to accommodate the digital revolution, sir, we will be left outside like pariahs and lepers, not able to engage in the rest of the world when the rest of the world is going down this platform. And what we do to manage the digital revolution, whether through our national digital ID system, whether through the protection of cybersecurity and enforcement of skills and standards so that people know that in the same way you're not going to walk down the road in the middle of darkness with 10 big gold chains around your neck and do things to invite people to commit a crime against you, you need to take the actions to protect yourself from those who will want to attack you digitally or through cybersecurity. Mr. Speaker, those six things come together because we believe that those six things at the first stage in post of 2030 allow us to have a better life for our people through mission transformation. I started this debate by making the point that it has become popular to curse politicians, that it's become popular to discount the work that public servants have done along with politicians to be able to build this country, that it has become a forgotten thing that the population has a role to play in terms of making the country livable and capable of more production, that if you go to work, don't steal 2 or 3 hours of time because you ain't hurting the body, you can hide land and buy land, but you can't hide and work it. So that when you thief in time, who you hurting in the long run? You're hurting everybody. All of us are taxpayers. And all of us recognize that right now the weight that we carry in to lift this country can't be carried alone by 267,000 people, particularly when the numbers of people over the age of 60 have increased so much. And if we therefore want to lift the weight of running Barbados, we're going to need a little help in here in order to do so on a consistent basis because we were a little too good at controlling population and a little too good at improving quality of life and lengthening life in this country. Declining birth rates, declining death rates. The two add up to a major problem. And for those who say that you cannot increase population and increase GDP, I say look at Singapore. I say look at Bermuda. I say look at Bahamas. It's self-evident. And in a very real sense, what I know about my constituents is that they do not want a declining quality of life. They do not want not to be able to have their children go to university and to be able to get there without having to worry how they're going to pay for it. They've met that fate in the last decade and they said, no, we don't want that. And while there may be some issues for tightening up what the hospital delivers, for the most part, we have been able to produce and present excellent health care for many people. The Accident and Emergency Department went through and is going through difficulties with respect to the move. They had expanded capacity, they thought, with the new A&E, and then COVID came and restricted the numbers that could go in there. We agreed to go upstairs and to allow an expanded area on the ground floor as well, incorporated. That has only now just been finished. We are getting additional staff there, and we will do the things necessary to continue to modernize the hospital, including how to be able to create it and let it function, in a digital environment far more efficiently and effectively than it has been able to do. But the point is that tell me how many other countries in the world you can go and get access to healthcare, primary healthcare, as well as the possibility for tertiary healthcare treatment any part of the world. We still represent one of a few, free of charge, at point of delivery. And that is why I make the point that even when we had additional people living here, when the last government made a big deal about it with those who came in from CARICOM, you don't give a child access to school. The child's still living in Barbados. What going to happen? The worst thing is a bright child that don't have no opportunity to be able to take that child's focus and engage them in productive activity and to root them. As Minister of Education, I know what it was all the time to say, let them go in school. When you leave them out, what will happen to them? Similarly, with health care. And these are the things that we need to understand. Where are we and where we stand? We believe that this thing can be managed properly. We believe that we have to manage the expansion of services as we manage any migration of persons or any repatriation of Bajans coming home to live, as will happen. But in managing it, it requires a very careful balance. But this country certainly cannot continue to sustain the way of life and the benefits that it provides to its people with a declining and aging population. We only need to look at ourselves. As we get older, the things that we could have done are not the same things that we can do now. And the bald reality is that there are many a man and woman who want to look in the mirror and defy it and say, I can still do it. Not just locally, but internationally. But the reality is that the one thing that will either be an ally or a foe that you cannot control is time. The one thing you cannot control is time. And therefore, the longer we take to make the decisions, and the longer we take to give the country the assurances that we will have the checks and balances in place so that there is not an inordinate flood of people, but that there is a carefully managed process, the longer we take to do that, the more we are likely to suffer. We have had the experience of the welcome stamp, the digital welcome stamp. And it worked well for us, in part, but the truth is that it is not the destination, it can only be a bridge, because the welcome stamp does not contribute to the tax take of the country. And it should and could if we did it via a different mechanism through immigration. We have had the opportunity also of knowing how CARICOM people have been able to add value to this country. And in areas of construction and agriculture, there was a time where if you didn't have those persons living here, helping to control the price of work, laborers in agriculture and construction, the level of inflation and cost of living would have gone through the roof at a much earlier point, because it's straightforward. If you don't have enough people available, you do not have the capacity to control what you pay them, because all of a sudden people start then to determine what their literal price of engagement is. And that is why in many countries the absence of available labor has led to cost of living increases. One of the consequences of COVID was that a lot of people did not go back into jobs in the hospitality sector and in the restaurant sector, particularly in the United States of America. And that has contributed in part, along with increasing interest rates that was driven by overheating the economy by having the kinds of packages that they had. The combination of the high interest rates and the high wages of labor has led to cost of living being a major, major issue there, perhaps more so than a lot of other countries there. Similarly with us, we have cost of living driven because we import almost everything that we use. And therefore we are takers of what prices come and cannot shape. We can mitigate, as the government has tried to do with respect to freight costs, with respect to the compact, with respect to reducing the tax take. But the notion, and I see others, including members in this House, talking about reducing land taxes just arbitrarily so, without recognizing that the consequences of so doing will have an impact on another area of taxes and taxation. People forget that this government reduced income tax levels, rates of income tax in this country in 2019 for everybody, increased reverse tax credit and who could benefit from it. Before you had to be earning $13,000 to benefit from it. Now if you earn $25,000 a year, $2,000 a month, you get a reverse tax credit. Now you pay less. Those who earn between $2,000 and just over $3,000 a month, just under $3,000 a month, sorry, get the compensatory income credit so long as the government can afford to give it back to you. But there's a very delicate balance of what we're carrying, not because the numbers aren't there, but because on the other hand, you're giving out a range of benefits with respect to free education and free health care and a number of other support systems for the elderly that we just talked about and the welfare system, etc. Barbados has a strong, caring infrastructure. And it does not come cheap. And if we are going to maintain that because we believe in equity and we believe that those who are the most vulnerable must be taken care of, then it means that we have to manage carefully how we grow the economy, but equally ensure that the systems that are necessary to make sure that everybody can benefit and continue to benefit in a way that improves their quality of life, that can be done with efficiency, sir. This report, therefore, here is a commitment of this government to be accountable to the people and to ensure that in spite of the fact that the members of this commission went across the length and breadth of Barbados, that it is now time for the Parliament to have its say in this chamber and the other chamber. There will be consequential actions that flow from it once we have heard where all of it settles, and those consequential actions will have far-reaching implications for the state of Barbados and for the state of families and their way of life in Barbados. And Mr. Speaker, therefore, I commend this report for the support of this honourable chamber. I thank, as I said, the commission who did the heavy lifting and the work. I thank the honourable member for St. Michael South Central for being able to lead this debate for us and to being able to work with the commission in the early stages as minister in the Ministry of Economic Affairs. And I say simply to Barbadians, in life, we do not always get the opportunity to make the decisions that we want or to live in the environment that we want to. We have to take it as we find it. Our country is in a crisis with respect to an aging and declining population. And our country needs now to take decisions that may be difficult for some, but necessary for all. That decision will lead to us committed to maintaining our values and our way of life as we know it. And fortunately, the philosophical underpinnings of what has brought us safely thus far in the last 82 years is still pretty much there. We won't get everybody, but it's still pretty much there. So long as we retain those philosophical underpinnings, so long as we commit to ensuring that as we bring people that we can manage their integration into this country, so long as we continue to make sure that our values remain predominant in so doing, then, Mr. Speaker, this is the right thing to do. We can't do like Germany and bring a big adrenaline shot, as much as some may feel that that is the option, largely because it's too destabilizing. You can destabilize an organism in a large space, but when you destabilize an organism in a small space, the likelihood of disproportionate consequences may be too great. We have the ability to manage this. We have done it in the past, and the situation we find ourselves in today was forestalled by literally the number of persons who were here from within CARICOM in the early days, in the late 1990s and the early 2000s. The country lost them, and it is paying the price of having lost them, both in terms of our tax receipts, but also in terms of our national insurance and social security stability. It is up to us to walk this road again. There is no magical genius about Singapore. Singapore made a decision to grow its land and to grow its population. Barbados has made decisions in the past to grow its land and may well make decisions again in its future to grow its land. But it must, for sure, grow its population, because whether we like it or not, people in their 70s and 80s cannot do what people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, and even 60s can do. The facts are bare, and it is up to the country to make the right decisions to secure its future, rather than to see a diminishing return with respect to all that we do in terms of development. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Honourable Mr. Michael South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir. I will try not to be extended on this particular speech, but I felt that I too I should raise and lend my voice to what I think is perhaps one of the most important conversations this country would have, even though perhaps the country doesn't recognize how important the conversation is to begin with. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is obvious to me that we need to have a conversation around population and population policy. You know, many people may think that sometimes people think the world is static, like what we had a few hundred years ago is what we still have, or that the changes that have occurred are the changes that are occurring now while the population is indeed changing. It is my opinion that we have to have a policy, sir, to allow us to plan properly for what is to come. Mr. Speaker, sir, the reality is that the world is 2,000 times the size of what it was 12,000 years ago. It is 2,000 times the size of what it was 12,000 years ago. In fact, then the population, they say, was 4 million. And now we are talking in billions. And one would think, given that rate of increase, or that increase in absolute terms, that this would continue forever, that the population would continue to grow forever. But the truth is, sir, the rate of growth had stopped since about 1962, had been declining since about 62, 63. So that we could expect, sir, at some point in time, the world to start seeing reduction in numbers, sir. We know, for example, that Barbados has already started seeing that. In fact, that is what the population study tells us. That, as the Honourable Member for St. Peter said earlier, that we would have thought that we would have had 280, 290,000 people, but the census and other pieces of valuable information, they're telling us the same thing, that the population of Barbados is declining. Sir, this is obviously a cause for us to have some concern, sir. If this growth rate continues to decline, we have to be very concerned about it, sir. The question is, how is this relevant to Barbados and why? How is this question on population relevant to Barbados and why? We know, as I said, that we're declining in absolute terms, but it's the rate of decline, sir, that I think should really concern us. The speed at which this population is declining, sir, is really what should concern us. If you can see declining numbers so clearly from one census to another census, it tells you immediately that the speed rate should offer you some degree of reason to be concerned, sir. And I use the word concern and not alarmed because I think we have enough time to plan. In fact, the reason that we have a population policy before this House that the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central is leading is because we are planning. And it is in the fact that we are planning, sir, that would allow us to deal with a number of these issues that will present themselves over time, sir. But we have to prepare ourselves for what it is we see coming. We often say in this government, sir, that you should not react to something you ought to have seen coming. A few years ago, sir, when I was doing my master's, sir, and I wrote my dissertation on the elderly, there was a book that I read called The Ticking Time Bomb in relation to how the world was aging. I had, at the time, I wrote a lot about Barbados, but I'd also read a lot then about countries like Bangladesh and so on, sir, and what it meant for those countries. At the time, it almost seemed as if Barbados had time. We had a little bit more time, but it is clear to me, sir, that we do not have the time that we thought we had, that I surely thought we had when I wrote that paper, sir. And I agree with everyone that this is a conversation on economic policy, and that it is a conversation, sir, on our social policy. Sir, if we have a declining workforce, as the Prime Minister just said, as all of the data tells us, if we have a declining workforce, sir, and you have an aging population, and then you have a young set of people who have not yet entered the workforce, normally up to 15. You know, the dependency ratio is calculated 0 to 15. The young, those normally above 65, the old. But inside of that now, sir, you have to add the people who are young, who have mental issues, who have disabilities, and so on, who also have to be supported. We therefore have a problem, sir, with our dependency ratio, and it is one that we are going to be forced to confront and to address as a nation, sir. And this has serious implications for Barbados, sir. It has serious implications for the country. So I would want to speak today really very briefly on only two things. I want to talk, sir, about the aging population, and only very specifically, sir, about one thing about it that is troubling me. And then I want to talk very quickly about young people, sir. I do not intend at all to be long. But, sir, the aging population is something that we have to concern ourselves with. Our latest census and the population report and everything tells us that our population is aging. Barbados is considered to be an aged society. I tell people when they speak of Barbados now to stop saying that Barbados is an aging society, because that day is past. We are an aged society. And heading very quickly for being a super-aged society, where over 21% of our population will be elderly, sir. Sir, I was asked by the Honourable Prime Minister to speak at a conference a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, in her stead, sir, on eye care. And while I have responsibility for aging, sir, I have never, I must confess, considered eye care in the same way that I was exposed to it while I was at this particular conference, sir. And during the course of that conversation, sir, the information was made available to me of the number of people in this world, and I anticipate in Barbados, who are dealing with eye health issues. Sir, we know that vision is the most dominant of the senses, but that there are a significant number of people who are dealing with eye health issues. In fact, sir, we take it for granted, but as we all age, we all deal with eye health issues. All of us. I was in a room with the Honourable Member for St. James North, I think, and a few others. And there were 8 of us in the room, including, permit me to say, Janelle's Honourable. And Janelle is blind. And Janelle is one of the advocates in the ministry, and she's working on making sure the policy, sir, becomes part of our normal understanding. But I looked across that room and I was joking to the others that the truth is, me and Janelle shared a joke that the only person in that room of 8 people who did not wear glasses was Janelle. But everybody else in the room needed to wear glasses, sir. Everybody in the room needed to wear glasses because as you age, your eye health deteriorates, and it deteriorates rapidly. I am convinced, sir, that the cost, in a number of ways, the actual cost of dealing with it, sir, but what it costs people who are unable to see well and not being able to join the labor force, sir. People get irritable. You ask somebody to read something, a man might be prone to violence, you ask him to read something, he can't see it, he gets upset, sir. We have to think about this. I must tell you, sir, that it is my strong view. And I used to think when I was young, I used to say growing up in the plain that the people who live in certain areas are healthier than people who have money. But it has become my point of view now that it is not that they're necessarily healthier. They just don't maybe go to the doctor as much, not getting their checks as much. Because I would see people 50, 60 years old, sir, in communities that that I represent, communities that that I grew up with, sir, where these men are not and women are not wearing glasses at all. And I say to myself that there has to be, given the ratio, the natural ratio of how people have to wear glasses as they age, there have to be a certain amount of the population in regular communities too who should be wearing glasses. And that we have to find a way to make sure that the average Barbadian, as this society ages, have access, sir, to proper eye care. If you do not have proper vision, sir, it completely affects your quality of life. It affects your capacity to earn. It affects your capacity to be a productive member of the society, sir. And I was saying to the honourable member for St. Peter, even as we talk numbers, we have to talk about quality. Mr. Speaker, sir, I feel that we have to therefore make it more accessible, but also, sir, because I know we will say that it is available, you can go and get your eyes checked if you want. But somewhere along the line, sir, I am extremely concerned about this eye health because I know if I look around the room of people who are above a certain age with glasses, and in another place, nobody with glasses, yet we're asking these people to be able to read daily, read the newspaper, read the internet, read this, read that, sir. We have to be able to do something about it, sir. I think it was Yellow Man who had a song, if life was a thing, money could have buy, the rich would have lived, and the poor would have died. And everywhere I go here, the poor man cry, you can't take it. But, sir, I believe so while obviously not as linear as that, sir, there's something to be said about how we make healthcare as the population ages available to those who do not have necessarily the wherewithal, or a person might not want to go. You know how it is. A man might say he ain't wearing the glasses, sir. I say this because I know as if our population continues to age and we want to get the best out of everybody, sir, we have to make sure that they have the best chance to be able to do so, sir. The other problem that I came into contact with is that the vast majority of people who have issues with eye health, as would be the case in this Barbadian population, and many who go blind, sir, are dealing with preventable vision loss, or what they call unnecessary blindness, sir. That a lot of people who go blind are dealing with unnecessary blindness because some people refuse, sir, to want to go to the doctor. Sir, when I was growing up, there was a man, a very nice man, in the community that I grew up in. He was a diabetic, a bad diabetic. Everybody knew he was a diabetic. And then sometimes with diabetes, apparently you go blind, then it comes back, and you go blind, and sometimes then it went permanently. But we could not get, his name was Carlisle, put me to say, we could not get him to stop drinking. And even though he was dealing with what clearly was preventable, the process of adapting behavior to save his own vision was too much. I do not know now, sir, that it is enough for us to say that people can go or people can have access, sir. I think we have to find a way, sir, because the opportunity cost, but the real cost of dealing with preventable eye loss, sir, and a lot of it, sir, from refractive illnesses and cataracts. So these are things that we should be able to address. There's a whole set of disabilities associated with aging, sir, in Barbados that are preventable. We met with the Amputee Association very recently, sir. They were telling us, sir, about some of the things that they have experienced. There are just a number of things that we have to be able to fix. There can be no conversation on population, in my mind. Recognizing that a part of it is the fact that many people who are in this population are getting older. There can hardly be a conversation about population without a conversation on aging, and a conversation on aging without a conversation on disability. Because in Barbados, a lot of us who age are dealing with disabilities, whether it is an eye loss, whether it is a physical disability, whether it is just a general sense of malaise, and of course, sir, with dementia. I concern myself with this, sir, because I know we're going to have to deal with it one way or the other, sir. In this policy too, sir, on my second point, the policy goal number 1 speaks to ensuring a population size sufficient to grow and sustain adequate levels of care, productivity, labor force, and labor force participation, sir. But nothing stays static. Sir, I believe the issues that we are having now with our young people, sir, requires a different approach, not only from the government, but we also have to change. But I read very recently, sir, Hilary Beckles, sir, he was suggesting that the university has to offer a different perspective on helping us manage some of our social problems. Universities are gauged by their capacity to offer new knowledge. In societies like Barbadian society, sir, in small island developing states, the university has to be involved in helping us solve our social problems. It has to be. But also, sir, the church has to be involved in helping us solve our social problems, the private sector, everyone. This situation that we are facing, sir, I know people are very concerned about the violence, sir. I am very concerned about the violence too. But I would say to you, sir, that in my opinion, the violence is the worst manifestation of something that we are dealing with on a lot of different levels. Our inability to care about other people, sir. You know, as our population ages, there was a time when we believed that the younger people in the household were responsible, sir, that they had a duty to look after the older people. Our population is aging, sir, so we have more older people. But the people, the younger people, do not see it as their responsibility to care for them. So it's more of a burden now on the state. But it's that lack of care, sir, it is pervasive. You hear conversations between, and sir, when you look at a lot of the murders, sir, especially in the last year, this last year, sir, it is a lot of it, not all of it. 2 people had a quarrel. You know, there used to be an oligoli. 2 men have quarreled, so 2 men must fight. Please stop them before it is too late. And the lady goes on and saying, one of us won't sleep tonight, one of us won't eat tonight. Speaking of Asian. Yeah, speaking of Asian. My mother used to play these oligolis every Sunday. 2 men have quarrels, so 2 men must fight. And you know, sir, petty quarrels. Petty quarrels. And these things, sir, are resulting in people being deprived of their lives. Because to me, sir, it is a situation around care. And people just don't seem to care about other people. And so, you know, I tell my daughter now is at the age where she goes out, I say, listen, if you bounce anybody, my darling, please say, I am sorry real quick. I know, sir, if I do anything, I offer drinks quick. Let me buy you back a drink. Quick. Because that is what's happening now, sir. And I'm saying that the manifestation that we're witnessing in violence is perhaps, sir, part of that trajectory that is fueled by the lack of care, which takes me into a conversation in our homes, it takes me into a conversation in our schools, it takes me into a conversation in our communities. I say to people too, that the idea that we can solve poverty in the Ministry of People Empowerment is a non-starter, because by the time you come to the Ministry of People, you're already in poverty. You already need the help. The solution has to be before that. The police cannot solve our crime problem then, is my point. The police cannot solve our crime problem. And sir, I do not think our crime is out of hand. I really don't. But I do believe, sir, that if we are going to tackle it, it has to be all of us, sir. I was making the point, sir, I speak to the Honourable Member from St. Peter and the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central a lot. But I was just making the point that as we look at these numbers, we are assuming things. We are looking at the population numbers, and we are saying in absolute terms, well, we have X amount of people of a certain age. But if you look at that X amount, you must start subtracting. How many people of that X amount, sir, of working age are actually getting the skills or want to have the skills? Because not that they don't have the skills, want to have the skills. How many training programs the Ministry of Education has put on? When I look at the amount of offerings in terms of skill training, you can find training in Barbados now for everything, sir. I offered training recently to some young people. You may tell me what training, minister, they don't call me minister, call me Kurt. What training, Kurt? We're looking for money. We're looking for money. And that these are long-term conversations that we have to have if we're going to be able to resolve this, sir. But I was saying, like, when I look at what is available in terms of the attitude, people's capacity, sir, people's desire to want to stay the course, people's, sir, you know that if you take a job, there has to be sacrifice. You might work from X hour to X hour. You get a lunch hour. These are things that are normal. You would think this is regular, everyday conversation. This is normal things. So there are a lot of young people who do not even begin to understand the concept of a lunch hour. People who would say, I ain't working for nobody, which is fine. If it means that you want to go and work for yourself, if it means that you want to be an entrepreneur, but if it means that you don't want to work at all, when we look at that working age population, sir, even that dwindles. And therefore, I suspect, sir, that we are going to have a lot of problems, sir, with aging. Aging, in my mind, is going to be the most difficult challenge before this country, because our population is aging and because simultaneously the mechanisms of care that existed for them no longer exist. And the situation with our young people, sir, because a lot of the young people, sir, need to have a different conversation. It is impossible for me, and this is probably where I divert from some. It is impossible for me in clear conscience to write off anybody, sir. There's some for whom, obviously, in a group, you would see some and you can't work with them. But there's some, sir, that I cannot bring it in myself to write them off. Because many of us are only in this place because a teacher believed in us. Somebody in the community believed in us. Maybe somebody in the political arena saw something in us. There is something inside everyone, sir. And we have a responsibility, I think, as a nation, to try to find it. To try to find it. They say, not all that glitters is gold. That is true. But not all that is gold glitters either. And that there is, in my view, sir, a number of young people in this country, sir, who just, with the adequate support systems, and we have to do it, because the population policy is telling us that we want to produce people, sir, in goal 1 to ensure we have a population size sufficient to grow and sustain adequate levels of care, productivity, and labor force participation. If you want that, sir, you can. There's no way you can have that if you're excluding the young people, sir. We have to find new tools to be able to address some of these old problems. because the old problems are manifesting themselves now in new ways, sir. In new ways. So I could speak at length, and I won't, sir, because I really want it to be brief. I could speak at length, sir, on this matter, but it is clear to me, sir, that on aging and in terms of youth, we're going to have issues, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, in our elderly policy, we discussed a number of things, including housing. The Honourable Prime Minister just spoke that in this year's estimates, the ministry was given monies to build out facilities. We've been actively going across the country looking at different spaces, sir. I think we've identified a place, and very soon we'll be taking a paper to Cabinet and hopefully thereafter constructing a facility, sir, to allow for daycare for the elderly, sir. I would like to have 2 facilities to start off. One, sir, we were starting in the east because we already have a space at Sterling, and one closer to town. But I also want to have one, sir, quickly thereafter in the north, and one in Christchurch, just to begin with. And I think it is going to be important that we build these facilities, sir, because obviously, if I say to you that the mechanisms of care that we thought we could rely on no longer exist, the state is going to have to play that role. But here's the dilemma. Eventually, even the aging increase will plateau, and then it will decrease, because we have less and less people. If you overbuild facilities, as they have done in some places in Japan, if you overbuild, then once the decline starts to happen, you have a whole set of facilities, and you won't have people to fill those facilities. It's part of the planning process. So we have to plan carefully, we have to plan thoroughly, we have to plan using the data, sir. I believe, sir, that the international statistics tell us, sir, that when we look at aging, there is so much opportunity, either in terms of people's capacity to consume, because the older population generally has access to more resources. So to be able to be consumers, but we also have to look at older people as producers. This population study tells me, sir, that we're going to have to find ways for older people to be part of the economy. So that's what they call their silver economy. To allow older people, sir, to be in the population, sir, but not to be seen as a burden. For persons with disabilities, sir, to be in this conversation, sir, but not to be seen as a burden, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, I recently got my first official pair of readers. Officially. I bought a pair, I bought, you know, they sell them cheap in these stores. I bought a 1.25 one time. I know the numbers, I didn't even know what they meant. A 1, a 1.25, a 1.75. I officially got my first pair, sir, of readers. And it is because as you age, you naturally become farsighted. That is why you see, don't mind men that trying to hold on in the pretense that they could maintain youth forever. Nobody drinks from the fountain of youth outside of these fantasy movies. You see people, sir, reading their things because you become, it's called presbyopia. You become farsighted as you age. Not Prescott, you're probably the only person drinking from the fountain of youth. Forgive me, sir. But I'm saying you become farsighted as you age, sir. And all of us are going to have to deal with that. All of us. I, sir, as I said, sir, recently got my first pair of glasses, and, you know, my fear, and I wonder if this is the fear that the men in my constituency and other places are having, because I know, given the statistics across the world, I know when I look across a room of other people that people are in glasses. I know that the amount of people I see on the street that are not wearing glasses is too small. The math, as they say, sir, is not mathing. Because it can't be that the average percentage is X high and in certain places is lower. That just doesn't make sense. So I believe that we have to, and I will do it, start talking to some more community people, sir, about the necessity, sir, to be able to wear glasses. And to wear glasses because it allows you to see. Sir, you know, People sometimes get irritable and want to fight and think when they feel like you push them in a corner. You tell a man, sir, about going to the doctor, sometimes he may get cruel. I have a constituent, sir. I don't know if he's listening. He's my dear, dear old friend, dear friend, dear friend. As some people become when you become an MP. And one day he and I were having a conversation. So I just feel this conversation about healthcare, as people get older, has to be part of our population conversation. We were having a conversation. And he told me that lately here, he's now probably like in his 60s. Lately here, he said, as I turn 60-something, I find when I drink Guinness, I have become allergic to Guinness. And when I drink Guinness, my nose bleeds, because he's now developed an allergy. I said, my man, I don't know that this is any allergy, as I think you perhaps had consumed too much Guinness. But as you get older, that which your body could tolerate, it can no longer tolerate. My man, you need to go and see a doctor, because this is obviously a deeper problem than you think. You know, he was trying to convince me that it was an allergy. Even as I left the conversation, I couldn't convince him to go and see a doctor. And there's a lot of people in our society, sir, like that. And these things have a cost. And therefore, sir, I believe as we discuss the population policy, going forward, sir, we have to look at all of these issues. It makes a significant difference. We have to look at transportation, housing, education, retooling our people, sir, to make sure that even as we discuss a number of these things, sir, we are in a better position to be able to address them. Mr. Speaker, sir, I will close with this, sir. During the last set of estimates, the last estimates exercise, when the Honourable Member for St. Peter was in the well, I had raised a constituent of mine, sir, who had paid X amount of contributions, but not enough. He was just short. I walk around my constituency, sir, and even among some of my friends, and I ask them, have you been making contributions to NIS? Sir, a large amount of them, sir, not making any contribution whatsoever to national insurance. I have a very good friend who most of my colleagues know, who goes with me everywhere. He would tell you that from the time we started hanging out, I was saying to him, my man, put something in the NAS. You're not getting any younger. Because at the end of the day, sir, when you get a certain age, you depend on those funds to be able to get you past the mark. You depend on those funds, sir, to be able to help you to live. If I say to you that we're getting older, we're having less children, and then the ones that we're having, sir, we need to work with them to make sure that they're productive. It means that we have an even larger space. So the conversation is not about NAS having money for NAS' sake. The conversation is about us being able to support an aging population. Sir, I spoke on this matter when the Honourable Member for St. Peter was in the firing line. And the comments, sir, I read the comments, sir. This is not for me. Sir, I with all of my heart, even if I were not in this place, if I were somewhere else, I would tell Barbados that one of the most important conversations we can have is on aging, and I would tell Barbadians that one of the most important parts of that conversation is about putting down something to make sure that they can live, sir. A lot of older people would tell you, as I said earlier, that the younger people just are not caring for them. They got to care for themselves. And that is the conversation we have to have, sir. So on this population policy, sir, I wish to offer my fullest support. I wish to offer my fullest support, sir. I want to make sure, sir, that Barbadians recognize, sir, that this is a planning tool. We are planning. The population policy allows us to plan. It is that we see what is happening and we are planning for it, as will be the aging policy, as will be the disability policy, and so on, sir. So I wish to support this policy, sir. I give it my fullest support, sir, just as a Barbadian, but I also give it my fullest support, sir, as the minister responsible for aging. And I commend the work, the good work that is being done by the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central and all of the team, sir, who has worked to make sure this is possible. Thank you.
Honourable Member St. James South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to start by congratulating the speakers who've gone before me, who've spoken so ably about the crisis that we're facing as a result of population policy. And the reason why I consider it important to share in this debate is because deep in my heart, I have a deep commitment for us being able to build a republic, a country that works, a country that prospers. And the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast can tell you that there are 3 or 4 different crises in the world, each one capable of toppling the prosperity of this country if it's not properly handled or managed. In the past, we've spoken about the impact of climate crisis, the impact it will have on food and availability of water. We've spoken about the impact of climatic events that could wipe us out in one night. If the global financial architecture remains unchanged, it will be difficult for us to move forward as a country. And the fourth is this population crisis. And has been so ably mentioned by the other speakers in terms of the numbers that affect us. This population crisis is going to make it difficult for us to create a viable society where people can create a decent living for their families. Now, we've heard that we are at 270,000 people. And as I've shared on other occasions in this chamber, the number of people that you have actually working matters to the cost of living. If you have 1 million people, sir, and you have to build a hospital or you have to build an airport, you have more people sharing the tax burden of providing that hospital or providing that airport. If you're only 270,000 people, then the tax burden becomes heavier because you have fewer people who are actually carrying the cost of the provision of goods and services. And therefore, it cannot be too strongly put what this imbalance in our demographic is going to do to us if we do not very quickly start putting things in place to address our population crisis. We will have spoken about the fact that you will have insufficient contributions to your NIS. That will collapse. But a government that is forward-thinking, that cares, that is competent, will start and make the necessary adjustments. And that's what we did a couple of years back when we made adjustments to the NIS, and we alerted the people that as we go forward, as the dynamics change, if we have to keep making adjustments, we will do so because it's important to keep the NIS solvent. The imbalance in the population, we were told, will impact on tax revenues simply because you have more than half of your people by 2050 will be over the age of 60. And therefore, the working population that we have to work with is going to be extremely limited. Of the 139,000 that would be left, most of those, about 40,000 of those are going to be children. So you're going to have something like 95,000 people who are going to work. Now, here is the additional crisis. If you have 95,000 who are working, and the majority of them are in low-wage jobs, then you will never generate sufficient economic activity to grow the economy. You will not generate sufficient consumption to fuel new enterprises that will provide jobs for the young. You're not going to trigger sufficient income to be able to give government its tax revenues to support the services that we've taken for granted for so long. And therefore, one of the issues that would be relevant to us in dealing with the population crisis is found in the vision and plan of this government for this country in terms of what we're seeking to do in terms of economic growth. Let me just share a few thoughts on that. While the quantity of persons is important to this process, it is the quality of the individual that matters. What they think, how they function, how they prosper, how they socialize, decisions that they make. And we have seen enough in this country in the last few years that has told us that we have a problem with the social fabric of the country, and that if we don't work at improving that, we are going to find ourselves in a situation where we do not have a viable population because our people are not adequately trained, not adequately socialized to be able to function well in this economy. And so, what does that mean? It means that if we are going to improve the economic performance of this economy, we have to find meaningful ways to increase the skills of our people. And what this speaks to is the absolute necessity for transformation in our education system in order to provide our young people with the necessary skills. And how would that help us? If you have higher skilled labor, it means you can attract a better quality of investor into the country. You can attract the types of jobs that will allow for good pay, that would bring good spending in the economy, will help us to generate foreign exchange, and as a result, we will be able to build out the economy because skilled labor will give you better enterprises, will give you better economic outcomes. And that is why the work in the Ministry of Education is so important, especially in the area of tertiary education. One of the plans that we are currently working on is how can we intensify and encourage more of our young people who may now be sitting on the block, who may now be underemployed, who may be at home frustrated, or who may be looking to go overseas to get a job. How can we encourage them to utilize the programs that we have put on the table to assist them to acquire the skills that we need to build out the economy of Barbados? And this is why the Construction Gateway program is so critical to what we are doing here in Barbados. We just recently launched a cohort, and we are seeking to attract as many young people as we can to take up some of the skills that we are offering. But this government did not stop here in terms of looking at tech-voc education and improving our technical skills, but has sought to attract persons who can come into Barbados and provide us with the opportunity to acquire skills in things like cybersecurity, where they're able to earn higher pay. We are creating a global worker who can work from Barbados, but able to offer that service any part of the globe, and therefore become a global worker. And so the cybersecurity program is important, and I just want to alert the Chamber and alert the population through you, Mr. Speaker, that another cohort is being sought for September, and we want to encourage as many people as possible to take up cybersecurity. We've also looked at the artificial intelligence training, and there are a couple other courses that are going to come online that will provide our Barbadians with the higher level skills that will attract greater income. And that will help us to offset part of our problem of too few people working. If we can increase the pay, it will help significantly to help us come to a better balance. I have been very pleased with the process that we have engaged in with the National Transformation Initiative, where we've been able to offer through Coursera a whole series of training programs that, again, will help to lift the skills. But one of the problems that I think, if we're going to tackle the issue of the quality of the population, we have to help people re-engage in learning and to love learning again. People have become disengaged with learning. And that's one of the reasons why we have discussed what do we need to do to increase that interest. One of the problems that we discovered was that many people coming out from the general education system had not mastered their literacy skills, their numeracy skills, and that this acted as a disincentive to people to continue going through education And so one of the things that we have put into the construction gateway training is that remedial training in literacy and numeracy, along with IT and civics, in order to help them build a stronger base so that they can absorb the construction skills and go out and get that job. So quality of the population matters, and the Ministry of Education is doing its part under the leadership of the Honourable Member for St. Philip West to bring the necessary transformation that will give us the base from which we are going to build our republic. But there is an underlying philosophy that needs to underpin the building out of our republic, and it is taking a different look at how economics can work. In economics, we've been told a lot about the economics of scarcity. And this is generally a man-made situation, where if there's scarcity of any product or any resource or material, and lots of people are demanding it, the seller recognizes, here's an opportunity for me to make more money, so I'm going to raise my price. And what is that lovely, wonderful position of having that scarce resource? But what does that mean, sir? It means that if I normally pay $200 for an item, and it suddenly jumps to $400, it means that the $200 extra that I have to add, now somebody else is deprived of that particular spending. So what the economics of scarcity does, when people use scarcity to keep raising the price, it keeps destabilizing the enterprises within the system. And this results in loss of jobs, and it affects the economy significantly. So what is an alternative approach that we can use if we're going to build out quality populations? The first thing I believe that is important is that each person has to be able to discover and develop their potential. That if each individual is able to acquire skills in the area of their interests, skills in the area for which they have aptitude, they will bring a level of creativity, innovation, passion, and interest to that particular area. Just imagine if we were able to accomplish that in Barbados. What you would have would be passionate, energized workers going to work every day because they were doing something that was consistent with them. Not only would they be able to get a job because of the interest and passion, they're able to bring creativity and innovation. And if we start to help our people commercialize their innovations, know how to take that idea and make a business out of it, this is where now they too can become part of the entrepreneurial class and part of the asset building class. And this is important. Once people have the ability to do what is consistent with them and be creative and innovative, it means they're going to bring to market goods and services that have global value, that have global interests. It means, sir, that as those people operate, the enterprises will grow strong and be able to do more export. If we could accomplish that in Barbados, our economy would grow. That economics of abundance, where people are using their creativity to create goods and services and generate jobs because of it. It means, sir, that people being able to work, producing money, developing assets, earning from their entrepreneurial talents, now can increase their consumption. And that increased consumption will again lead to the growth of more and more enterprises. And therefore, if Barbados is going to tap into a system such as that, where we are able to produce people who can bring innovation to the marketplace, it means that we have to have that revolution in how we're doing our education, how we're doing our technical and vocational training. And that is where the work is for the tertiary level students and the tertiary level institutions. One of the things for me, sir, if we are able to get this right, we are going to be able to build a society that is prosperous, a republic that works. But the other half of that equation isn't just the opportunities we're going to give to our young people through training. It is what will happen to our aged population. In my own constituency, I have 11,000 people, and of those, close to 6,000 are over the age of 50. And that is a worrisome thing, sir, because their families are small, their children are living overseas, and it's difficult. Their care is difficult as they get older, as they become enfeebled, as they become unable to work, to go to the supermarket, to wash, to clean the house, things like that. And so, one of the things that Barbados has to look at, and I want to thank the Honourable Member for St. Michael South, who spoke about the care for the elderly and the importance of re-engaging some of the seniors into work and providing services for them that would allow them to be able to re-engage in the economy. That means that we have to look at how we're going to build out our silver economy. The elderly need a set of services and goods provided to them in such a way that those goods and services are within their reach, within their means, and is delivered to the quality level that allows them to be able to comfortably live in their homes. And therefore, it is important that we look at how we are going to respond to the opportunities in the silver economy. This means that we have to turn the attention of our entrepreneurs to start and examine this special group and look to see how they are going to adjust what they are doing in order to service this group, because there are opportunities there for work, for building prosperity, serving within the silver economy. Areas such as health care, their food and diet, their need for exercise, being able to conduct business, their need for recreation, the need for care and respite facilities, the need for financial services. All of these are going to be important if we're going to properly serve the silver economy. Now, on the area of recreation, I just want to give a quick example of how we are losing within the economy when we are not looking at the provision of services. One of the services that is going to be quickly needed for our elderly population, there are two that are of critical importance. One is being able to use a computer so that they can improve their ability to live independently. That's going to be very important. But for the same reason that was shared earlier, the lack of ability to see at night has caused many elderly people to withdraw from social activities. They don't go to anything that is going to finish after sundown. And so immediately they curtail and limit their capacity to go out, like at crop over, to go to those activities, going to church, going to special concerts. All of these are things that now become unavailable to them because they do not want to risk to be on the road. For a long time, I have sought to find persons who are willing to look at the provision of transport for special activities to allow these persons to be able to engage socially. If we were able to do that, again, you would raise consumption and spending within the Barbadian economy. These are the things that are important if we are going to be able to help our elderly engage within the population. But the most important thing I think that is needed for them, a number of them are still of sound mind. They're still able to get around, move around. Part of the issue that we have, especially during COVID, sir, was the fact that a lot of those senior workers were not re-engaged in work. When companies closed, many were laid off. When companies re-engaged staff again, they stuck with their younger workers. And so we have a number of people who never got to finish that mortgage, who did not get to complete having their child get through university. People who wanted to do traveling, who were unable to do so because now they're deprived financially. because of what would have happened during COVID. And one of the things that we have to spend some time thinking about is how are we going to create economic opportunities for seniors to be able to work again. Many of them do not wish to work 5 days a week. They don't want to work 40 hours a week. What they want is the opportunity to be able to work 2 or 3 days a week so that it fits within their energy output, it fits within their interests, but at the same time, they're going to be able to earn. If we are not able to help them do that, one of the backlashes from that, sir, is going to be their inability to maintain their housing. Their housing will start to deteriorate. It will get more and more costly as they seek to respond to the fact that the house needs repairs. And eventually we will find ourselves with a number of structures that are uninhabitable. We will find ourselves with a huge bill trying to rehouse seniors because we did not find the mechanism to help them re-engage in activities where they could earn some money, not every single day, but at a pace that they could manage, but would make a difference to their income. And so, sir, I want to close by saying our republic needs to meet the needs of everyone. And we need to look at what we are going to do in terms of care for the elderly, improving how we're training and skilling our workers, how we are raising our children, how we are socializing them. And we need every single part of our society to work together to make it happen. We need families to work together. One of the most distressing things for me as an MP was to recognize that there are a number of families that are so dysfunctional they could not help themselves during COVID because they could not work together. They could not lay down the anger. Now, if they can't lay down the anger inside of the home, you can imagine what will happen out in the wider society as they engage each other. The crime rate will keep rising. And therefore, there is a need for us to start and do parent training in our communities, because it is the only way we're going to pull back what is happening between what we need to do in the school and what we need to do in terms of parenting. These are two things that can help make a difference in our communities to help break this pipeline that is fueling crime. I want to sincerely thank the Honourable Member for the city, the National Peace Program, and the Honourable Member for St. Joseph. The National Peace Program is supporting a number of parenting programs that are being launched in July all the way through to almost the end of the year. These programs are important. My concern, however, is how are we going to attract the people who really need to be in the parenting programs to attend? I think this is something that we have to look at to ensure that we get the numbers so that it helps to make the difference. Just in another couple of hours within the constituency of St. James South, that National Peace Program with the parent training is going to be launched. And we are very thankful that the Caribbean Institute of Social and Emotional Learning and Paradox, they're working together to be able to deliver that training for our parents. I believe that this is something that if we can embrace this across the country, I think that it could go a long way to helping us repair the fabric. Because right now, there are some parents who are not capable of rebuilding the fabric because they themselves were never properly parented. So, Mr. Speaker, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to have shared in this debate, and I want to congratulate the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central for piloting the bill and the speakers who have shared, and let us continue to work together to build a better republic, build a better Barbados in which our families can live and prosper and our seniors can live in security and peace.
Honourable Member St. James North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to join and contribute to this debate which, as the Honourable Member for St. Michael South said, is not, he didn't use these words, one of these sexy debates, but which is really an important, very important and significant debate to our socio and economic and cultural development. When I was a young boy, 50 years ago, I believe at that time Barbados was the second most densely populated country in the world per square mile. It is no longer that. It is, I think, way down, probably about the 19th most or around there. And that's as a result of what we've heard repeatedly throughout this debate, that our growth rate within the last 50 years has been very low. In fact, it's the lowest population growth rate in CARICOM. And our population has grown only by 16.5% in the last 60 years. We've heard as well, of course, that our fertility rates have remained below replacement rate since 1980, I believe is now estimated to be 1.9 per person, as when the replacement rate to keep the population at the same level even is 2.1 per child. And what is even more concerning, of course, is that over the next 30 years, our dependency ratio, or ratio of young people of working age who will be looking after senior citizens, is expected to grow to nearly 2 dependents per person of working age. This is an issue, Mr. Speaker, that not only besets Barbados as a problem, but the whole world, to at least most of the world, I should say, not the whole world. And it is especially so in the developed world, the so-called richer countries, the OECD countries of the world. And in fact, The Economist magazine, in its edition of May 25th this year, less than 2 months ago, in an article entitled, "Can Rich Countries Spend Their Way Out of a Baby Shortage?" spoke on this issue for 3 pages and spoke towards the kind of policies and incentives that some of the wealthy countries in the world are utilizing to try and increase their population by getting young people to have more children. So in fact, France, since this century, has dispersed 3.5 to 4% of its GDP a year on a mixture of handouts to young people, to couples, tax break services, to try to increase its population. The Nordic countries, as we know, combine a lengthy maternity period, up to 1 year, I believe, even more, in Sweden or Finland, with getting generous child care. And of course, some European countries combine that with a paternity leave as well. China, of course, there are provinces in China which are offering newly married couples a lump sum, but only if the bride is below age 25. In other words, their philosophy is the younger the bride is, the more children the couple will have. And in Russia, women who have a child before they turn 25 will be exempt from income tax payment. And Hungary offers a similar benefit to mothers who have their first child before age 30. So these are all areas of policy decisive making that countries in Europe are seeking to increase their population by baby boom. In United States, there's a non-profit organization which pays women $7,500 from the time of pregnancy to the first birthday of the child. So it is not only Barbados that this issue is, on the minds of legislators and policymakers. I commend the scripters and those who were party to the creation of this policy. I would have met with them when I was Minister of Home Affairs for a whole day session. And I know the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central was in attendance as well. They have, and it's significant, and the Honourable Prime Minister mentioned that, they have not put a figure on what they perceive or imagine to be a reasonable population size of Barbados. Right now, the census is saying is about 269,000, having declined. But clearly, there are now many countries in the world that are just above the size of Barbados, which has much larger populations. Issues, the study though does propose issues such as widening our citizenship criteria, or rather citizenship possibilities, by bringing it down. Right now, as we all know, an individual is only entitled to Barbados citizenship by descent if either of their parents are Barbadian, but bringing it down to grandchildren and possibly great-grandchildren, as we heard the Honourable Prime Minister say. And this has been mooted and thought of since I was Minister of Home Affairs, and that is now 4 years plus ago. Even now, sir, it is so serious that even now, I still get emails and WhatsApps as to whether, from people, Barbadians living overseas, as to whether their children are entitled to, their grandchildren are entitled to Barbados citizenship yet. So it's something that we need to move on. I know that the Honourable Member for Christchurch East has promised, especially recently, a new immigration bill which will address these issues. And I believe he understands the urgency of dealing with this situation. When I travel to our missions in England and New York, for example, as I'm sure other members of Parliament and ministers do, the issue is raised by the missions and as to the number of Barbadians residing in those jurisdictions to which they cater for, obviously, who ask and inquire about this issue, whether directly to the missions or at town hall meetings when Barbadians in authority visit. So it's something that I think is definitely required by our diaspora, and as a means to widen our Barbadian population and certainly citizenship. And we all know that regathering is on again next year, having been unavoidably aborted in 2020 when COVID came upon us. And I believe that will be an opportune time for us to have new immigration legislation in place and policy, so that we can offer the children, the descendants of Barbadian citizens beyond their children, citizenship of Barbados. We have to, of course, encourage repatriation of Barbadians and stem our brain drain. And I know that that's not such an easy task Mr. Speaker, because the whole profile of individuals is to travel and seek what they consider better opportunities outside of their country. And, but obviously if we make Barbados more attractive to young persons especially, we will get more Barbadians coming back home rather than wanting to stay in the northern hemisphere. The fact of the matter, sir, though, is that we have many people who are not born in Barbados residing in Barbados too, because the United Nations estimates that 12% of our resident population here in Barbados are immigrants, are people who came to Barbados, mainly from other Caribbean countries, more women than men, 55% being female, and 75% being of working age, generally between ages 15 and 64 years old. So even though, as other members, in particular the Honourable Prime Minister said, even though we have been immigrating to other countries since emancipation, whether it's Panama, whether it is obviously the northern countries, England in the 50s and 60s, many of our people there were nurses, worked on the London transport, whether it was Canada in the 1960s, 70s, when Canada started to open up its immigration laws and policies to allow professionals to come there, especially from the Caribbean, and many of our nurses went there, for instance, even coming across then from England to Canada, and whether Panama, as we all know, yes, 1/3 of our people, particularly men, left and went to Panama and helped build the Panama Canal, including my grandfather. So even we have been a people who seek better opportunities outside. And therefore, quite honestly, it was extremely disappointing to me, and I say it again, as I've said in this parliament before, for me to be in parliament as an opposition MP and see the policies of the previous Democratic Labour Party government during the last decade, in which they intentionally had a policy of sending out people who were contributing to this society, to our economy, and sending them back, especially to other CARICOM countries such as Guyana and Jamaica. Ever so welcome wait for a call by the late Prime Minister, then Prime Minister, and of course followed on by his successor Prime Minister too. And all of us are one in this CARICOM, as far as I'm concerned. Slave ship just let some of us off here in Barbados, some of us off in St. Vincent, and some off in Trinidad, but we all came from the same place. And therefore, it was especially disappointing, and that was the crux of a matter. Whether there were 30,000 Guyanese here or not, as the opposition said, those Guyanese were contributing to this society. They were paying income tax, and a lot of them. They were spending money. In fact, many business people around Barbados said that their businesses went under as a result of the policy of the last Democratic Labour Party government to send home Guyanese and Jamaicans, because they were the people supporting their businesses. Businesses in Fairchild Street, for example, especially on a weekend. So, look, we know that there is a sector of xenophobia. That is the word that was used by former Deputy Prime Minister, Barbarians or some Barbarians when it comes to allowing or the idea of people coming into Barbados, especially from other CARICOM countries. But it has to be understood that an increased population in Barbados, an increased productive population that is working, of working age and skilled, will increase the economy of this country, will increase the GDP of this country, and will make life better for everyone, including Barbadians who live here all their life and who are born here. And that we have to have an open view of this issue. It cannot be a myopic view if we want to move to the next level. It is estimated that the number of immigrants from Barbados, people leaving right now, still exceeds the number of immigrants entering Barbados on an annual basis by, on average, about 400 persons a year. So it is not a troubling situation, and we have to of more skilled persons coming in this country, more people trained, for example, in some of the areas that we have identified as areas and animation and specialty rums and pharmaceuticals and biotech industries and energy and renewable ICT. And those are areas that we need skills in this country, and we have to be open about it. Another way, of course, and people, of course, that have the resources and capacity to invest in our country and in our future, and also has to be encouraged as well. Therefore, I look forward in anticipation for a debate on the immigration legislation. I know that the Honourable Prime Minister has said that that legislation, as is the recent bent of Cabinet and Parliament, will go before one of the select committees of Parliament which were formed last year for wider public consultation. We had some consultations, I believe, earlier. I know the Population Commission had consultations as well, because I attended a meeting last year, a town hall meeting, that was held at Alexandra School. The issue, though, Mr. Speaker, is that it was disappointing that many more Barbadians did not attend and participate in these town hall meetings. And this is a problem, that this government has been extremely transparent and accountable, much more so than any previous government, giving our people the opportunity to input, but our people largely don't take up the opportunity. And then when you pass the legislation, when you pass the policy, and something happens that affects them, you then get a big lot of noise and long talk. And I urge Barbadians to come out more in this participatory democracy that this government has created and is seeking to further, and have a say in these issues that would affect us. The issue has come up as to a fear among Barbadians that more people in this country will put harder work on our infrastructure, on our public utility network and transportation, and our water supply, and our health and educational services. Even though that is clearly a challenge, as I said, sir, when more productive people are in Barbados, our economy will grow. One of the challenges will be to ensure that these people of working age and who are working pay the income tax and pay the NIS. And that is very important, because there are too many people that feel that they are doing well by cheating government and not paying income tax. I came across a person the other day, sir, who gladly told me makes about $10,000 a month in one of the trades. I wouldn't say which trade, because I don't want any identification of the person. But he doesn't pay any income tax, doesn't pay any NIS. In other words, he making more than my parliamentary salary, but not paying any income tax or NIS. No, the government authorities have to tackle this issue. And it will be interesting to know from the NIS department, by whatever name called Social Security Services, to know since the adjustment and change and making it easier for people to pay NIS and to pay by installments as the work, let's say these 2 months to pay in then, but the month they don't pay, don't have to pay in. It'd be interesting to know that with those adjustments which came into effect on the 1st of January this year, whether the percentage increase in self-employed persons paying NIS has moved significantly from what I believe we were told was just 15% last year when the amendments were debated, led by the Honourable Member for St. Peter, and I think it was September last year. Because a dent has to be made, and people need to understand that they need to pay the income tax and the NIS, because you can't want all the social services, free education, free healthcare, or you want all the roads repaired, street lights, any house that licked down the roof off during burial or else repaired by government, even if you have the money to repair it, fishing boats now to get repaired, but you don't contribute to the gross, to the income tax and to the NIS. So this is a challenge that will have to be looked at once we're bringing in more people. But I have no fear about the overextension of our educational and healthcare system and our infrastructure and public utilities, because I believe that as we grow, all of those would be looked after with more money in our economy. The number of Bajans, and this is an interesting statistic as well, Mr. Speaker, that the study brings out, that the number of Bajans living overseas total almost 30% of our population. So in other words, if our population is about 270,000, about 90,000 born and bred Bajans live overseas. And that's an interesting statistic. And like I said, when you add up their children and the grandchildren, you can start seeing that. And once we make Barbados more attractive, we will get some of them back. That's the truth, especially, I suppose, as they seek to retire. But we also want some young, productive Bajans and persons of Bajans descent to come here as well. Even if it is, because we have a more attractive environment and more attractive climate. The issue of government, therefore, as well, has to look at issues such as paternity leave. And I know that it is something that the administration is looking at. I believe it was in the Barbados Labour Party's 2018 manifesto. I can't recall if it was in the 2022 one as well. But I know that can have a bit of complications because there are some men that might want to claim maternity leave for two sets of children from two different women. But it's something that certainly the administration needs to reflect on. Issues of flexible working arrangements is also something that has to be looked on, because let's face fact that with the main burden for raising children being on women, we have to come to a situation, and for many reasons, where we have a better facilitation of flexi work. We had it during COVID, sir, and we can do it again, even working from home, some people. So these are issues that would need to be addressed as well. I agree and support the argument by the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central when she introduced the resolution that just calling on Barbadians to have more children, as was done on the floor of this Parliament by the Democratic Labour Party's last Minister of Education, is oversimplifying the issue, because a child conceived tonight not going to be really productive till 20 years at the minimum from now. So when the Honourable, when the then member for Christchurch East Central stood up right there, sir, and made that statement, I was quite honestly astonished. But a simplified brain will give a simplified solution to an issue. Has to be more than that. The issue is that there are a lot of women who may be, I don't even want to say below the poverty line, but living in economic circumstances that are not the best, who will ask the question, but how now you're asking me to get more children, so who can help me pay for them? And then we all know that a lot of women who may be in better economic circumstances and in professions and advancing their careers don't get more than 2 children. 1, if any, and a lot none. That is their right, of course. So again, quite honestly, when a member of the last Democratic Labour Party Parliament made a statement about women who didn't have children, again, I was astonished. And in this Parliament, when she was sitting in the chair you're now sitting, Mr. Speaker, in her capacity as Deputy Chair, I chided her, because that is a foolish statement too, right? So it is not an easy issue to circumvent. Yes, we have to, it would be good to have more fertility policy issues and speaking about well-beings in total of family. The fact of the matter, as the Honourable Prime Minister referred, our policy starting in the 1980s for family planning probably worked a bit too well. That's the reality of the situation. And of course, in the early 1980s, we brought in on the floor of this Parliament termination of pregnancy legislation, something which I wholeheartedly support, because a woman has to have the right to determine her sexual and reproductive health and to determine what she wants to do with her body. So I totally am at conflict with the United States Supreme Court on that issue, reversing the effect of Roe versus Wade after 50 years of precedent. But that is the United States, sir, and there are other CARICOM countries that still decriminalize abortion, but I will have none of that, sir. A woman has to have the right over her own body and has to have the right over her own body. So we accept that there are issues which which are challenging in terms of population increase, but those that are that you can reach out and touch, like changing our immigration policy, like wooing more people into Barbados by the policies that this government is implementing and seeking to invent, and to make Barbados a more investment-friendly place must come in. I commend and support this population study, Mr. Speaker, and thank those who served on the commission for their public service to our country. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Honourable St. Joseph.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this chamber do stand suspended for a period of 10 minutes.
Question is that this honourable chamber be suspended for 10 minutes. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This chamber stands suspended for 10 minutes.